I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker today, a personal friend of mine with whom I've collaborated on a number of occasions, Dr. Chris Puttock. He was very instrumental. He's, for the past 2 Rotary years, was chair of ESRAG, which has been one of the fastest growing Rotary action groups. That is the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. So Chris was born in the UK, raised in Australia, and has lived here in the United States for a number of years, including Hawaii. So quickly read, so he has 3 decades of experience in environmental conservation and restoration. He is particularly concerned with the maintenance of ecosystems to function naturally, sustainably, and in preventing the demise of ecological services by human exploitation, etc. In Hawaii, Chris was the liaison for 12 government and 4 NGO organizations, managing 100% of their marine areas and 87% of the land of the Hawaiian Islands. He currently is executive director of a group called Chesapeake Natives. It's a nonprofit that produces native plants, particularly perennials. Chris, I turned over to you.
So today I'd like to talk to you about ESRAG and the environment area of focus, and Rotary and what I see as our humanitarian crisis. We have a lot of things going on, and some things are taking over as being very, very important and get a lot of bandwidth time right now. So today we will look at some of the things where we are with Rotary, giving us the new scope of looking at the environment as part of our humanitarian work. So I'm going to throw us all in the deep end right from the start. I'm not going to talk about Milankovitch cycles today. I'm going to talk just about the case that we've got a change in our place in the world where we have been progressing through what scientists would say is climate change cycles for millions and millions of years. But today we are looking at a change in the whole dynamic of what's going on. So the world's temperature had been dropping by around about 1 degree every 500,000 years. And that's to do with its place in the universe. So the last climate minimum, which we would call an ice age, was around about 23,000 years ago. Climbing out of the ice age through the cycles that we do, the climate maximum was around about 10,000 years ago. Then humanity changed from living in forests, being hunter-gatherers. Largely, it discovered how to grow crops. And then by doing that, we actually changed some of the landscape because we were using more land for growing crops around cities. And so that increase in work in agriculture changed the amount of carbon dioxide we had, and it also changed the amount of methane that we're producing. And so essentially what we were doing for the last 6,000 years or so, this is Ruderman's thesis from around about 1990, was basically doing ourselves out of the next ice age. We had been looking at the world's temperature as being something that was really very much the same for the last 10,000 years. Then we have done something very different in the last 200 years, which is to create an economy that's completely different from anything we've had before. And this industrial revolution changed the world forever. And so on my graph, this one here, it shows that the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere is actually matches that temperature change over those millions of years. It basically follows it. But where we were supposed to be going into an ice age, we have now released carbon dioxide to a massive extent that wasn't in the atmosphere before. And so what we've done, we have created a biodiversity crisis because we've converted at least 70% of the land that's was forested into agriculture. And now we're asking the questions, can we really feed 8 billion people with even the land that we have? We have a resource crisis because we've been converting materials into permanent waste and putting them into landfills or sea fills instead of recycling them, which is what nature does. And then we have a climate crisis because we've been converting millions of years of stored energy into heat trapping gases that surround the earth. And we are hoping now to have some way of reducing that impact. And so where we are today is in a place that hasn't been around for around about 40 million years in our temperature. And then has the world experienced this before? Yes, it has, but it was so long ago before humans came out of the forest, which was somewhere around about 250,000 years ago. So we've got a big problem on our hands, and how to deal with that is where we go from here. So as I've been saying, we're releasing all this carbon. It's been stored away. We're releasing it so fast that basically every years of carbon that was stored in the earth is now being released every 3 seconds. That's pretty amazing. So what this impact is doing, these 3 things, we're introduced species into new places, which is causing havoc with the native species that we have. We've got species loss. We've got introduced diseases that are associated with animals, plants, and obviously humans. We've got inbreeding depression among animals because we've depleted the number of animals within populations to low numbers. We have resilience, a problem where we are face to face with big animals, and usually those big animals come off worse. And we are producing so much plastic and other chemicals, putting them into the atmosphere. And so we're basically creating a space that is certainly in a lot of places unlivable. And we've got this human destruction that's going on. We're cutting down about 15.3 billion trees a year that are not being replaced. And these are in the Amazon and Southeast Asia and other places around the world. So we turn around and say, well, what's climate going to do with this? It's going to remove about 8% of the species that we're going to lose in the next 30 years. And this is through fires and floods and heat and sea level rise. But we continue to lose a lot of biodiversity through the change that we're making to the landscape through habitat loss, and which then creates ecosystem loss and human destruction and the diseases. So where are we? We've got the forest has gone away. We're replacing it with grain. We've got the sea with more plastic in it. We've got the sky, which is too hot. So 30 years ago, what happened then? Paulo Costa who was the Rotary International president in 1990, decided to have a part of his programs that called Preserve Planet Earth. He started Rotary Ecology Day, which is the 1st of November. And believe it or not, the Rotary Club of Washington, DC started its program called Trees for the Capital. And so these programs have been going on in some way or another. Some programs were largely squashed because the environment was seen as a hot potato and too political. So by 2010, the revised future vision actually left out the environment from the 6 areas of focus. And by doing that, what happened was the environment wasn't able to get funding directly for any environmental projects. Only projects within the 6 areas of focus clearly were able to be funded through through global grants. Not so much so through districts, so we could actually do some environmental work through district projects. I put on the screen here the Rotary mission statement for the new area of focus, supporting activities that strengthen conservation and protection of the natural resources, advance environmental sustainability, and foster harmony between people and the environment. Now, that is a really amazing statement, and one that I'm not sure that a lot of Rotarians has been able to grasp yet. So within the environment, what we see is we have to produce a lot of food these days without biodiversity loss. We need to produce a lot of energy without producing greenhouse gases, and we need to produce a lot of commodities without waste pollution. On the right-hand side of this is the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And in this diagram, which they produced, they really show that the rest of the world sits on top of the biosphere, recognizing the importance of everything we do in society being attached to the environment. So in 2016, the group that I was largely instrumental in starting up with several others is ESRAG, the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. And we follow the guideline of every other Rotary Action Group is to have a world where people unite to take action to do something. And then for us, it's protect the environment and for a sustainable future. And the mission statement of Rotary Action Groups is to inspire and empower the Rotary family with extensive expertise, networks, education, and best practices to implement sustainable and impactful projects. Our projects are environmental projects. So where are we in relation to the other 6 areas of focus? And you see on the left-hand side of the screen here, the 6 areas of focus actually leave out a lot of the parts of the Sustainable Development Goals. So the environment actually picks these up as part of its mission. So we want a world that doesn't produce pollution and those invasive species that just interrupt native biodiversity. We need to protect biodiversity, but we still need to produce a lot of food. So these two, the yin and yang is on its side because we need both. We need to produce a lot of energy without climate disruption, the circular economy without waste production, and sustainable living and well-being and resilience against hunger, sickness, poverty, and inequality. So these statements are all in the new area of focus document that was given to us. And in fact, all the areas of focus have got slightly new definitions probably because of our existence. Within ESRAG, and I've been asked to talk a little bit about ESRAG. ESRAG is an organization now that is growing by around about 25 new members a week. The way we are set up is we have 12 regional chapters because we recognize that around the world, there are different emphases on different parts of the environment, and we need to recognize that. And so with the North American chapter, I've left West in there, unfortunately it's supposed to be East. Michael Terrelong and Jenny Lewis are our co-leaders. Regional chapters have regular meetings. They support district environment chairs. And so we're aiming to get environment chairs in every district so that we can then work more closely with Rotary clubs in those districts. So basically our mission is to work with Rotary clubs and districts, and this is the way we want to do it. So ESRAG provides a technical cadre of expertise for best management practices for projects that Rotary clubs would like to put into place. The very first thing I ever see is for a project, it comes from a club's desire to do something. So the community assessment from a club is so vitally important. If you don't have that, then a project doesn't really go forward. And so we would like to be able to assist with community assessment. So when Rotary clubs approach us for help, we would like to be able to do that. We also would like to be able to help with creating networks of partners. We are building up a whole network of partners that we would be able to link in to Rotary clubs as they're doing their projects. And obviously we see ideas about projects from all around the world, so we can help with assisting in the design and implementation of projects. Then what I see is vitally important, and where Rotary has often dropped the ball on this, is not gathering information on projects that they've been doing. We do good work and then we move away from that. And then 5 years later, somebody says, well, what have you been doing with a well in Africa? And they say, yeah, we put one in, but nobody's ever been back to see whether it works. Then the next thing I'd like to just mention is within ESRAG, we see that we are now called to be advocates for the environment, and other areas of focus have been called to be advocates for their area of focus as well. This is not something that has been pushed before within Rotary. And so we would like to see in Rotary a net zero Rotary, where we are not producing more carbon than we are able to absorb in the system. So basically, if we're planting trees, we then can provide some mitigation for the amount of carbon that we produce. And we also want to have a zero waste Rotary, where we're not creating a landfill from the products that we use, that we actually find a place where there's some use for the product after we have used it the first time. The cost of membership is on the bottom of this page. So some of the things we do, I mentioned advocacy. So we like to be able to introduce programs about work that's being done around the world. And so Shab Elawar is presenting a program on how environmental changes impact peace. And that's going to be on the International Day of Peace on the 21st of September, coming up next week. And then the next day, in fact, we have a presentation on sewage pollution of rivers and remediation. And this is by Prakash Tatar, who has had a 40-year career in dealing with sewage pollution. Then somebody who's local here is William Bauman. He's going to be talking about world vultures in crisis. There are 18 species of vultures in the world. 9 of them are now endangered with extinction because they're seen as scavengers and not necessary. But in fact, because they are scavengers, they clean up the dead animals from around the parks, and so they're actually helping with the environment. So there's a lot of where we can work with various projects around the world, and so these are just examples of how ESRAG likes to bring to the attention of Rotary around the world various aspects of where Rotary can actually be involved with projects. I'd just like to point out on this slide, and you can read down the left, but this is part of the circular economy and where we are actually producing carbon dioxide and the greenhouse gases and creating an environment that is overheating. And you see the blue on this is actually our built environment. This is where there's a lot of energy that's used in the built environment, a lot of carbon that's actually produced through that. You'd think that production of food would have a greater impact, and it does have a reasonable size impact, and you can see that there. And travel is almost equivalent to the amount of energy and greenhouse gases produced by for transport, and so on. You can see the other aspects of that, but you can, each one of the parts on the left-hand side of the screen are actually activities that we can actually be involved with our club projects in some way or another. Putting in composting, doing aquaponics, putting in pollinator gardens. And just talking about pollinator gardens, here's an example of a really good project that I see with Monarch Sister Schools program. We've Marianne Rischeberger, I mentioned her here, is leading the charge on telling about projects that can be done with schools and putting in butterfly gardens for the monarch butterfly, just as an example. And then my next example is one that your club actually helped me with in College Park. We put together a project with a club in Mumbai, the Narishwadi Tribal School project. And because back in these days, this was just 4 years ago, we weren't able to get funding for a biogas plant because it wasn't on the radar for an environmental project. So we put this in a project that was actually for teaching in a school. This is how we cleaned up this school with your club's help. This is the school kitchen before the work was done, and then the bottom right-hand corner is how the kids were then eating in a room after this project was completed. A much healthier environment for the children that in this tribal school, which is largely a dormitory school for these kids. Just down the road, is around about 40 miles away, is a big nuclear reactor where most of the parents would have worked. And in the school, we do maternal, and we actually put this project in maternal and child health and economic development, because this is where we could get the funding for producing a clean kitchen for the kids. Now we don't have to do that because we have an environmental program, area focus, and we can just go directly for the project that we really want to do. I just want to highlight just 3 more things at the end of this program. We have adopted the Environment Awards, EnviroClub Awards for our district. This is actually really good because it brings to our attention all the projects that are being done for the environment in the district. It also identifies the champions in the clubs that are interested in the environment, and so we can build up an environment committee that's really very active. We are now collecting information about projects in a much better way than we've ever done before. We have a project that we're starting in India, collecting all information about tree planting, but this is going to be expanded to all projects around the world. And then I've asked everybody in the district to sign on with looking at your carbon footprint, because I think that everybody should be really cognizant about how many Earths we are living by if we're the way we are living today, and look at various ways that we can actually reduce our footprint wherever we can. And if we can't reduce our footprint, we should plant some trees or do something else that would actually reduce or mitigate for our carbon and basically provide an offset. Just to finalize this, we've just started a program where anybody who has a garden could put into their garden some native plants which will replace the biodiversity that has been lost by planting lawns. And so I just want to finish off with just saying that these projects that we do, this is our Rotary handprint. We are all working together. We are working to try and create a better world for the future, a world that is not so damaged by overheating and overconsumption that we have. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. I don't want to get done.
Hey, Chris, I thank you very much. You have such an amazing vision of leadership. And thank you for all that you've done to make the environment the 7th area of focus of Rotary International, and your leadership with many projects and all the education that you've made possible through the webinars, etc.